Good morning, good evening, good afternoon, depending from where you're joining us. A massive welcome to all of you to this Contino live extravaganza, where we continue to provide thought leadership and thought-provoking sessions in the digital transformation and cloud worlds. I'm your host for the day, Deepak Ramchandani, and I'm really proud and excited here to be joined by a phenomenal roster of panel attendees, by Ollie Lawrence from EDF, Andre from AWS, and Josh and Luke from Contino. For those of you who might not be aware who I am, so I'm Deepak Vensi. I'm the Director of Strategy and Transformation for Contino. I've had the pleasure and the experience of working with some of the world's largest FTSE and S&P 500 organizations in helping them over their digital transformation journey and helping them establish sustainable in-house digital skills to be able to help them upon their transformation journey. I'm really excited to host today's session and moderate what's a discussion that's really front and center for all of us right now, given the impact of sustainability to our planet and to our environment. About Contino, if you might not be aware, we are a leading digital transformation consultancy that has had the pleasure to help the world's most heavily regulated and largest enterprises to become agile, nimble, fast, and competitive. And we've been able to do that by combining the power of change and agile ways of working, looking at how an enterprise of the future would work, and bringing together the power of cloud, DevOps, data, and software in order to deliver next generation experiences both to your employees, your customers, as well as your internal developers. And for today's session, we've got a phenomenal roster and a phenomenal panel, starting off with Ollie Lawrence from EDF. Ollie, did you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, hi everyone. My name's Ollie Lawrence. As Deepak said, delighted to be here and joining you. I work for EDF UK, which I'll give you a bit more of an introduction to. My role within EDF is the head of enterprise IT, looking after our platforms enablement right across the enterprise.
Sure, thank you, Ollie, and delighted to have you. Andre, did you want to introduce yourself, please?
Sure, thanks, Deepak. So my name's Andre Nedelku. I have a background in consulting, so around digital transformation mostly for the last 20 years. And here at AWS, I guess I wear two hats. I lead a team of solution architects who help customers on a broad range of topics, and sustainability being one. And I'm one of the sustainability ambassadors.
Cheers, thank you very much, Andre. I'm glad to have you both. Josh.
Thanks, Deepak. So I'm Josh Armitage. I'm the AWS practice head at Contino. I work with our clients and with AWS to try and find new and innovative ways to move forward and kind of explore the future together.
Cheers, thank you very much, Josh. And last but not by the least, our in-house sustainability ambassador, Luke. Did you want to go next, please?
Hi there. So I'm Luke Hansbury. I've been in the IT industry for 20 years, rather shockingly, working in population scale genomics, retail, finance, data, building solutions and platforms for all sorts of different sectors. I've been at Contino for a year and a half, working as a principal consultant, and I help our customers in their journey to cloud and to transform their organizations.
Cheers, thank you very much, Luke, and really delighted to have you all on the panel today. Before we get started, as I sort of mentioned, we're really here today to talk about actually, what has the impact been to climate change, and actually how the cloud can really help organizations on their journey to net zero. And we'll hear from Ollie, especially the impact that's had to the energy sector. But one of the elements that we wanted to kick off in the first instance is sort of touch about actually why now, what is some of the urgency that we currently are seeing, and provide you some thought-provoking facts and data to give yourselves a perspective around what is the appetite and what is the mandate for change at this moment in time. We will then hear from EDF and AWS, who will be providing us their perspectives and their roadmap and commitment to sustainability before we head into a panel discussion where we'll be talking through both the provider sides of the challenges that EDF can sort of share their perspective on, and then the supplier side from AWS. And of course, throughout the entire session, yourselves will have an ability to ask any questions, which we will answer towards the end of today's webinar. Do not worry if we aren't able to do that as part of the session. We will take away those questions and come back to you personally if we can't do that throughout the course of the webinar in itself. So just to give you guys, I guess, a bit of a perspective around why now and what's the urgency, and I just wanted to take a couple of minutes before we open it up to the wider panel to give yourselves a bit of perspective on where we currently are. So recently, for example, there was some figures published by the IPCC looking at actually, you know, the global greenhouse gas emissions that we currently have going on, and the fact that organizations and countries currently have up until 2030 to actually reduce those greenhouse gas emissions by 45% in order to reach the nirvana figure that we've all been hearing of 2050 in order to reach our net zero target. And for those of you who might be thinking actually 2030 isn't that far away, that's correct. That leaves us almost less than 10 years to be able to act. And actually, off the back of those figures, we were able to see quite some drastic changes and steps taken by countries and institutions, and for example, in this case, the UK government, who had to publish, for example, republish their new targets, looking at how we can hit those net zero carbon emission targets by 2050. And actually, they had to reprofile that by the fact that by 2035, we're going to have to achieve 78% of that target in order to be able to hit the 2050 numbers. And the knock-on effect of that in reality to organizations and to institutions was fairly substantial. We're now starting to see large companies have to compulsory report on their global energy use, and they've got to disclose the fact that what their annual energy use and gas emissions look like. And actually more and more we're starting to see government and organizations starting to take this step very seriously, and we can actually only expect to see more and more scrutiny and deeper penalties coming in from governments and regulators. What this also does mean is that no longer can organizations think about sustainability and their impact to the net zero targets as an afterthought. It very much has to be front and center of what they have to do, because not only are they seeing the pressure coming in from the actual government and institutions themselves, but they're also seeing the impact of consumers who are starting to be more and more conscious of the choices they make. An example there, for example, was published by Ofgem, where they ran a survey last year, and they realized that more than 20% of consumers looking at their energy providers now want to only consume those from organizations who provide clean and green energy. So we can soon start to see that organizations are going to get pressure not just from the actual regulators themselves, but also the consumers who want to look to consume their goods and services. And frankly, the big impact over there has also been driven by the significant growth and consumption of technology. I think safe to say we've all seen during the COVID-19 lockdown that we are more connected than ever, and frankly, to try and get anything done in this day and age without that connected nature of the world is frankly impossible. But just to give you a bit of perspective of where we currently stand, currently data center usage accounts for more than 14% of global CO2 usage. Cloud spend continues to rise more than 15% year on year. And if you were to look at this holistically, currently the global data center usage accounts for roughly the same energy usage of an entire country, in this case Spain. So you can soon start to see actually this connected nature of the globe comes at quite a significant cost. And with digital technology and with the connectedness of this nature, roughly estimated to reach more than 60% of the global population by 2022, we can soon start to see how technology actually is very much caught up in this entire sustainability race in making sure we're all making conscious choices. And the one last thing, just to leave you all with a bit of perspective, is currently the technology consumption and energy usage and carbon emissions is on trajectory to have surpassed the aero industry by this year. Again, just goes to show the impact of the connected nature of the global world that we currently live in, and the impact that has to our sustainability agenda. So safe to say, you know, the sustainability change that we all need to make isn't just something that we as individuals need to do, isn't just something a singular organization or a government needs to do, but something that truly has to be done as a conscious choice across all organizations. And henceforth, part of the reason why for today's session, we've got on one hand a supplier like EDF, on the other hand a provider of technology like AWS on the panel to actually discuss what this actually means to us. because frankly, looking at all the design choices and the digital hygiene we can all implement across the globe, those are the small changes that we're all going to have to make, and make conscious choices and decisions on those. Because, you know, the one quote that I personally love the most is people usually tend to overestimate what can be done in a year, but we often tend to underestimate what can be done in 10. And if we were to look at that magic number of 2030, where we all have to make sure the bulk of our efforts are in place in order to then hit the 2050 sustainability targets, the time to act is right now, and the time to change is today, not tomorrow. So with that being said, I would like to open it up to our entire panel. But before we progress, both EDF and AWS have made substantial efforts to publish their sustainability roadmaps and commitment, both to us as consumers as well as to the regulators and to the government. And Ollie, I would like to open it up to yourselves in the first instance, just to get a bit of perspective, actually, what's EDF roadmap and commitment to sustainability before we started off with a wider panel discussion?
Yeah, thank you, Deepak. So EDF UK, one of the largest energy companies in the UK, and certainly the largest producer of low carbon electricity. We produce around 1/5 of the nation's electricity, and that comes from our wind farms, from our nuclear power stations, and from solar. And the company supplies over 5 million businesses and residential customers. EDF is a purpose-led business, and our purpose is helping Britain achieve net zero. You will have seen that in our communications and in our broadcasting. This is a purpose that unites us in everything that we do. All of our ambitions are closely linked to EDF Group, centered in France, CAP 2030 strategy. And since 2013 and the launch of that strategy, the energy industry has obviously been in a state of constant change. Renewable energies are developing faster. We've had the European pressurized reactors now put in service in China and being rolled out elsewhere in the world. New businesses are emerging, as we've seen, such as hydrogen, electric mobility, and storage. Our customers' expectations around taking control of their energy consumption through digital technology are increasing. And as Deepak mentioned, society's concerns about climate change are also growing significantly. Another major change for EDF has been the introduction of the group's raison d'etre, which is to build a net zero energy future with electricity and innovation solutions and services, to help save the planet and drive well-being and economic development for our climate commitment and changes in the energy industry. So this was adopted in May 2020, and it binds us together in terms of achieving carbon neutrality in 2050. There are three key pillars to reducing the carbon footprint of our communities in France, Europe, and worldwide within the strategy. Designing services and solutions to help our customers and communities achieve net zero is the first pillar. Being a world leader in net zero electricity generation is the second pillar. And then the third pillar is to be the international player in the energy transition that Deepak has spoken about. What does that mean for the UK? Well, here in the UK, our company purpose, which I laid out as helping Britain achieve net zero, continues to align to the group CAP 2030 strategy. We've actually implemented a specific set of milestones to make sure we remain on track. The UK government has made net zero its top priority, or a top priority, and EDF is actively involved in almost all parts of the 10-point plan for green recovery, which was published at the end of 2020 by the government. And that plan sets out how Britain will achieve net zero by 2050. That's hugely encouraging from the perspective of our plans to enable £50 billion of investment in Britain's low carbon infrastructure. And that's very much mirrored in the 10-point plan, which is centered around more wind, more nuclear, solar, storage, hydrogen, electrical heating, energy efficiency, and electric vehicles. I recently read in the Times newspaper, EDF sits in the heart of Britain's green aspirations. And some of the key highlights from our roadmap, first of all, I'd highlight advancing offshore wind. So EDF Renewables is already building 450 megawatts of generation in North Maguire, which is an offshore wind project in Scotland. And we're looking actively for future opportunities for offshore wind in the UK, which forms part of an overall 4 gigawatt renewables in terms of planning and development. The second point I draw out is driving low carbon hydrogen growth. So we've investigated the UK's first hydrogen demonstrator project at a nuclear power station, which is actually at Heysham, which is up in Morecambe. And at Sizewell C, we hope to make it a major part of what we do. So investigating the wider hydrogen opportunities such as production and renewables, and the use of hydrogen for transport. Hydrogen is definitely a potential for fueling public buses, trains, and our work in hydrogen can certainly contribute to that point. And hydrogen, I think it's important to highlight, is a potential low carbon fuel also for things like shipping, etc. So it has a potential major opportunity for us. The third point is to pull out the delivering new and advanced nuclear power. We're already building the first nuclear power station in the generation at Hinkley Point C, which is down in Bridgewater in the southwest of England, creating jobs and boosting the local economy. I don't know if you've seen it, but if you look on BBC iPlayer, you can watch back building Britain's biggest nuclear power station, and there's a couple of episodes on that where you'll see some really impressive engineering feats that are taking place down there on the site. And of course, Sizewell C is the only nuclear project to begin ready to begin construction and create further jobs, and we're currently going through the consultation for that project. The fourth point is really around accelerating the shift to net zero emissions in vehicles. So our customers' business is doing great work in this space to grow the electric vehicle ownership. PodPoint is one of the UK's leading providers of electric vehicle charging infrastructure and already has nearly 100,000 charging points manufactured. Pivot Power, another organisation, is also developing in Britain and is the world's largest transmission connected battery storage and electric vehicle charging network. So we're creating energy super hubs that can provide rapid charging for those vehicles. And both those are EDF UK companies. The next point is really around green buildings. So greener buildings, I should say. So Imtech is one of the largest technical service providers in the UK and the UK's leaders in energy efficiency installations, installing more eco measures to insulate more homes and save our customers more money. We've recently relaunched the electric heat offer, which helps our residential and business customers lower their carbon footprint. We've also got protecting our natural environment in our roadmap. So clearly, by taking care of our power stations and the commitments we make as part of our renewables and nuclear projects, we're protecting the natural environments and biodiversity. And then I think from a green finance and innovation, our R&D teams are working with UK universities and are part of a global investment of £2 million a day in R&D on to support a low carbon future, and are looking at things like carbon capture. And the group has been trailblazing on green financing, and obviously in the UK, Sizewell C and others are driving even more innovation. So the 10-point plan from the government is really encouraging. Our alignment to that plan around more wind, nuclear, solar storage, hydrogen, etc., is all completely aligned. And the purpose that binds us all is helping Britain achieve net zero, which the future of that lies in our green aspirations as a collective.
Thanks, Ollie. And I mean, it's safe to say EDF UK is doing a lot actually across all the domains to make sure us as citizens and as enterprises can very much have that sustainable fabric, right? To make sure the choices that we're making and the consumption of that is done the right way. But safe to say, I guess the level above that, Andre, is also then making sure the digital fabric that's provided to the society continues to follow that methodology of sustainability that an organization like EDF as a supplier of the energy is laying on the ground. So it would be great to understand from your perspective, actually, what are AWS, given the role that they play in this digital society, sort of doing, and what's sort of their roadmap to commitment and to sustainability?
Yeah, that makes sense. Thanks, Deepak. And I guess the first thing to say is that at Amazon, because of our success and our scale, we believe that we have a very broad responsibility to address these kind of topics. And we are really committed to building a sustainable business. And to show this commitment, in September 2019, Amazon co-founded the Climate Pledge, which is a commitment to actually hit the targets set by the Paris Agreements 10 years earlier, which is 2040. And this is really, it shows how committed we are. And it's a pledge. We've co-founded it, and we're really looking to create momentum across industries to get our customers to commit in the same way. You can check the website. Today, there's 110 companies who have committed in the same way as Amazon did. And some very large corporations like Verizon, Mercedes, they're all behind this and looking to achieve this. And we are actually ahead of our target, and we're on path at the moment to hit 100% renewable energy by 2025, which I think is pretty impressive when you think about it, because 2025 is literally, as you were saying, Deepak, earlier, around the corner. Beyond this, there's a lot of other initiatives that the broader Amazon is looking to drive. We have a $2 billion climate pledge fund that we use to invest in visionary companies who are looking to really transition the economy to a low carbon economy. And we have a project called Shipment Zero, which is really looking at the whole carbon footprint of someone picking up a product in a warehouse and delivering it to your doorstep, including the packaging, including the electric vehicles, everything, and looking to make this carbon neutral as well. And by 2030, 50% of the shipments are going to be net zero, which, when you think of the scale and the amount of the shipment, is I think pretty impressive. In terms of energy, Amazon is the world's largest corporate purchaser of renewable energy, and we're really looking to power all our operations with 100% renewable energy by 2025. And I've pulled out here a couple of key stats on, just to give you the scale of what we're trying to do, and we're starting to see results, right? So between 2019 and 2020, we've reduced our carbon emissions by 4% already. And so we're starting to really create that drive and that momentum to go forward. So this is, I wanted to give you first, I guess, the broader context around Amazon in general. And so if we now zoom into AWS and what we're doing around cloud, we like to think of sustainability in three different ways, actually. So we first talk about the sustainability of the cloud, which is the AWS global infrastructures, and that's our responsibility to make sure it is as sustainable as possible. We then talk about sustainability in the cloud, and that's our customers deploying workloads and applications in the cloud, and which we're going to help to make them as sustainable as possible. And obviously, the last aspect is using the capabilities and the possibilities of the cloud to really innovate and build things that you were not able to build before because you have the scale of AWS, and that's sustainability through the cloud. And I'm sure we'll go back to these, to these different aspects in our panel conversation. But I just wanted to kind of lay the vision on how we look at this. And then, so more specifically, let's talk about sustainability of the cloud, because that's really, the ball is in our camp for this one. And we commissioned an independent study actually to look at how does running things in AWS compares with running things on premise. And I've really pulled out two key statistics here, which I think are very telling. The first one is when you run, our infrastructure is on average 3.6 times more energy efficient than the median data center run by US companies. And if you look now at the workload running in AWS or on premise, on average, we are going to be 88% with a lower carbon footprint in AWS. And that's a pretty impressive number when you think about it. And really, this is, the way we achieve this is by continuously investing in more efficient servers, big focus on higher server utilization, the way we build our facilities, try to make them more efficient, reducing the electricity consumption, using renewable energy. So there's a lot of different angles that we focus on to really achieve these numbers here. Another thing, we're talking about a lot about carbon neutral, but I just wanted to also talk about another thing which is very important when you're looking at data centers and cloud infrastructure, which is the water usage. Water is traditionally used a lot to cool off data centers, and that's an area where we have been really focusing and innovating to look at how we use different techniques like evaporative cooling to really run our data centers warmer than the traditional on-premise data center, but warmer in a much more means also in a much more energy efficient way and using a lot less water. And just to give you an example of one of the things we're able to do now is in one of our regions in the US, we're reusing 96% of the wastewater discharged from the data centers. So if you can imagine, once we're going to be able to do this across all regions globally, this is going to have a very significant impact on the planet, and that's really an important thing to think about. And then, lastly, the last thing I wanted to point out is around some of the more technical innovation we do. You might have seen some of the announcements around Graviton 2, which is an ARM-based CPU bespoke built by AWS. and that is now available on most of our regions and across a broad range of instance types in the cloud. And the reason I'm talking about Graviton 2 here is because it's the most power efficient the most power efficient CPU we have available on AWS, and this is a very practical step our customers can start to take, migrating the workloads onto this ARM-based processors to really start to drive energy efficiency and ultimately a drive towards carbon neutrality. So there's other innovations, we'll talk about them, but this is one of the key ones to think about when you're looking to optimize things running in the cloud.
Cheers, thanks, Andre. And I think it really gives a perspective on actually, just the sheer amount of work that AWS and more broadly speaking, Amazon as an organization is doing, but then looking at AWS that forms such a critical foundation for providing this digital fabric to society, all the great innovation that's happening in there. Ollie, you kind of sort of shared actually what's EDF doing as an organization to make sure the core fabric, the energy fabric that people consume is sustainable. Andre, you kindly touched upon the digital fabric that we have on top of that is sustainable. But I guess the last thing we also have to then bear in mind is the consumption patterns that organizations and individuals then have on top of that has to equally continue to be sustainable to make sure it's self-encompassing as opposed to just a part of the puzzle. And this is where I'd like to pull in Josh and Luke in a second. But I guess the first question, Ollie, this would be to yourself. EDF aren't just a provider or a supplier of energy, but yourselves are also a consumer of AWS in the public cloud, and safe to say the critical role that yourselves play in the national infrastructure also perhaps extends out to your consumption and usage of public cloud. So it'd be great to understand actually what role has public cloud played in also helping EDF move the needle, both as a supplier of energy, but then also as a consumer of IT services.
Yeah, thanks, Deepak. I think the first part of the answer in terms of helping us move the needle as an energy supplier, I'd like to talk about innovation, speed to market, and agility. I think they're three key areas to pull out. Innovation, meaningful innovation can really thrive on AWS and public cloud. For example, inventing new services continuously, extracting value from data efficiently, or modernizing the IT estate that we've got rapidly. We've heard a little bit from Andre about the rapid pace of technological change, which is disrupting industries of every kind, and that includes the energy sector. And all that change represents challenge, but obviously, and more importantly, unique opportunity for organizations and for ourselves to truly differentiate through that innovation. And I'll give you an example of that from EDF. We embarked on building a product called PowerShift. PowerShift is a product that allows customers to take control of their energy and essentially take inherent flexibility that they have and monetize that through EDF's trading services. So this allows the customer to talk to us and say, you can only dispatch my assets at this price, or I'm only available for flexibility between these times. And ultimately, there's an optimization schedule which show when customers can make and save money. So that's really sharing back the value of balancing the grid with the customer, and PowerShift's been completely developed on AWS. And as well as our own innovation, of course, there's the innovation that takes place in AWS, which Andre's touched on, and the other public cloud providers. And I think what's really important in that innovation space is the ability that it gives us to test and learn, fail securely without the large upfront investment. Also, as well as the technology, obviously there's the experience and inspiration that we take from elsewhere. So through other customers of the public cloud providers, through AWS, through Contino themselves, and also the leadership exec sessions and the connect sessions such as what we're having right now in this panel. In terms of the speed to market, which is another area I would draw out, it's really about freeing more time for that innovation and enabling growth. So if I think about some of our previous processes, etc., the handoffs that we would have had, the lead times, having to kind of start on one piece, leave it for a while whilst we wait for another action, decision, or something to come in. Working with Contino and AWS has really freed up that time to enable innovation and growth. And again, an example of that, we've worked with Contino and AWS to build an AWS landing zone. In simple terms, that provides a platform where our product teams can quickly go from concept to delivery and stay within our security and cost transparency guardrails. And that really allows us to focus as an energy business on our customers and to reinvent or invent that customer experience. So it's shifted the focus and the speed at which we can obviously respond and innovate. And then in that final piece around agility, I think obviously supporting innovation and speed to market requires a technical platform that allows for agile development and that rapid deployment at whatever scale is required. And again, another example where we've been able to do that is in response to the COVID-19 pandemic, where we've actually used our AWS landing zone to set up 2,000 AWS workspace instances following the industry best practice with regards to version control, automated pipelines, infrastructure as a code. And those fully automated pipelines are provisioning the underlying infrastructure while pipelines triggered by requests in ServiceNow, which is another product we use, provisions those individual workspaces in an on-demand fashion, which in business terms means that our leaders or our users can request, via our request management system, certain users to be provisioned with those workspaces, which come with certain access controls, and those workspaces can be available for users to log on within 15 minutes of the request. In the second part of the answer, which is around helping us to move the needle as a consumer of IT services, I think there it's about the phenomenal level of investment and innovation from AWS and in AWS Marketplace really allows us to access a huge capability and set of tools within the platform. I guess better still for all of us on the panel, we don't need to pay for that capability, all those tools, until we really need it, and that enables our developers, our builders, to build everything they can imagine, and for us to be able to spin that up, spin that down as and when we need to as a business. So we've shifted the focus in terms of infrastructure to platform, and this has shifted the needle in terms of technical currency, security, risk, resilience. I can certainly remember looking after the hardware, all the operational risks and concerns that would have gone into that, feeding and watering it from a data center perspective, all of the environmentals that goes into the data centers themselves as well. And really that risk, if you like, has shifted. And again, as an example, we've invested in developing an account vending machine that allows developers to request an account by raising a pull request in GitHub. The account's then vended in line with our security posture and all of the guardrails that are important to us, and they're automatically in place. So that builds a culture that says, all infrastructure deployed is code, which gets us away from managing that security, that risk, and that technical debt. And we can do that quickly and centrally while allowing the autonomy and empowerment within our development team. So cloud is really underpinning our move to DevOps, which obviously involves the combination of culture, practice, and tools. And we're automating our operations of both our software and our infrastructure, which is really enabling our product teams to be empowered, to be agile and deliver at higher velocities. The last point is probably around transparency of cost and optimization as a consumer. Again, I've got an example where we use multi-account and some native tools such as Kudos dashboards, etc., which give us clear lines of accountability for cost control, recharge, and optimization. And that's allowed us to look at how we reduce, we reuse, and we recycle. So, things like making the maximum use of utilization rather than having things sat in the data center that are used to a minimum utilization. So all of these things come together, and as a consumer, the cloud is then feeding into other elements of our strategy, such as our property strategy, where we're now able to think about migrating our data centers, which frees up the property, etc., to bring together a business which is more focused on its core and able to focus on the customer experience.
And Ollie, I think based on that point, actually, it kind of ends up giving you the double benefit, right? I.e., on one end, actually reduce EDF's own or provide EDF a more, I guess, sustainable consumption of IT services, but also further accelerate your ability to deliver even more sustainable energy out there into the industry, right? So it sounds like a win-win there. I guess to some of those points that you just mentioned there, Ollie, around providing that visibility into teams and making sure they aren't wasting the consumption of these, and they're using these services the right way, and they're reducing the amount of waste in there. Luke, you've always been an internal ambassador, of sustainability within Contino, and you sort of helped drive that with practices such as AWS and the work that we're doing with the FinOps Foundation. and you've often been a key change agent, right, with our customers as well. What do you think, for example, the role that we as an organization would have to play when sort of working with our customers in helping them on their sustainability agenda?
Yeah, so I think it's important to understand that business process efficiency and like the ability to deliver customer value in an efficient way quite handily aligns with ecological sustainability. And you know, the reducing of waste in your processes and in your resource consumption also aligns to, you know, an ability to improve your business sustainability, as well as the ecological side of things. You know, the cloud, the opportunities of scale in the cloud allows us to reduce our resource consumption when we're providing customer value. And you know, that pattern that's been enabled by the cloud has really been transformative for delivering business value efficiently. And you know, by doing by following that kind of pattern, we also reuse the infrastructure, the underlying infrastructure within the cloud to continue to deliver that value. You know, we have the ability to reuse code in those models of infrastructure as code, as Ollie mentioned, to continually provide value. So there is no need, for example, to reinvent over and over how we go about instantiating a point of resource for delivering that. You know, we also recycle the best practice because of the homogeneity and the known patterns in the cloud. So those patterns are becoming ever more well known, and effectively they shift left progressively. So it means you blow less hot air in meetings talking about design decisions because those patterns become much more well known. And you know, you effectively improve iteratively, which speeds up your time to market, which in turn means you're burning less resource while you're delivering those things, right? So you continually iterate, which as we've mentioned, you know, the 2030 magic date is not far away, and incremental improvements in terms of delivering value faster will shorten those cycles so that we can try and hit those targets sooner, and hopefully do all of us a good service.
Yeah, and I'd say safe to say, Luke, that the more we can avoid meetings in this day and age with COVID, where everything has to be a Zoom meeting, is always welcome, right? Although unfortunately we are having to do this via webinar, we would have done this face to face to even reduce another meeting for people. But I guess sort of using that thread there for a second, Andre, I'd like to come to you, because if we were to look at the role that AWS is currently playing, you know, safe to say the terms digital transformation and AWS very much go hand in hand nowadays, right? And a lot of organizations look towards yourselves in helping them move their needle forward when it comes to the transformation journey. But actually, I think there's another thread to pull there around how can organizations piggyback on the great work that you just mentioned AWS are doing to provide a more sustainable and ecologically stable environment. And, you know, there's always been a couple of tenets that organizations have looked like when they're building their digital transformation frameworks, and often sustainability has been an afterthought, but it's starting to become more and more key. What do you think organizations are looking to AWS for when it comes to helping advance their net zero goals, and what are some of the key asks that you're seeing from customers?
Yeah, so it's an interesting question. So in terms of the key asks, I guess we're getting from our customers, the first one is around disclosure. You know, as you said, you know, there's an increasing regulatory framework around sustainability and net zero, and so we're helping customers when they have significant workloads in the cloud work out the complete end-to-end carbon footprint for their workload. So that's one of the first key asks is around disclosure. The second ask we see is around you know, when I was talking about sustainability in the cloud, right? So our customers are asking us to help them architect in the right way and think about what they should be doing when designing systems to run them in the most sustainable way. And the reality is just like, you know, the other panelists have said here today, there are a lot of things in common with actually optimizing cost and running things in a very efficient way. And that's something we've been doing for years with our customers is helping them reduce their AWS bill and make them as efficient as possible. So we're really continue to drive these kind of conversations. And I think the last aspect that our customers are asking us is around innovation. We talked about the fact that we can reduce the footprint of what's running in the cloud, and we can make it super efficient and super lean, and that's great. But that's only going to get us to a certain point, right? We also need to start thinking out of the box and start to think about new things we could be doing and we couldn't do before. And that's where using the power of IoT, for instance, to collect data from a large number of sensors, or lots of wind turbines, or smaller energy producing facilities, and then use all the data in real time through the analytics you can run at scale in the cloud to be able to start to make different decisions or increase the visibility of what you're doing. They are the kind of innovations that we really a lot of our customers talk to us about, and that's not there isn't a cookie cutter solution for this. It's innovation, it's different. We like to work backwards with our customer on this, and really we have more of a process on how we work with them to identify what an innovation could look like, and that's really almost industry by industry and use case by use case approach that we need to take to help customers reinvent and rethink what they could be doing with the cloud to be more sustainable.
That's a great point there, Andre. And I think the element that you sort of talked about, looking at it, from a customer to customer perspective, looking at their architecture and helping them make the right decisions is certainly quite key, right? And Josh, I'd like to pull in you here for a second, because we've often seen a lot of customers go on their second or at times even third iteration of cloud, right? And they've often struggled to get it right. However, from our perspective, we've seen quite a lot of techniques and approaches, using the services provided by AWS to stop doing undifferentiated heavy lifting, be quite successful, and actually using the principles of lean and Groove software to improve sustainability measures has actually proven quite well. It would be good to get your perspective actually on what are some of these approaches that we've seen work well, and sort of how would we recommend organizations start that journey?
Thanks, Deepak. I think historically enterprises going on the cloud transformation have unfortunately fallen in a bit of a trap a lot of the time of doing data center in the cloud, which is unfortunate as they exit the data centers and move their workloads. When they go through that migration, they have a lot of rehosting going on where they should be re-architecting, recycling, and often under the pressures of the timelines of migrations, compromises have to be made. But really, when it comes down to it, the ecological impact of your software is an aspect of quality, and it's really taking that quality focused approach and building that in from the start that's going to allow you to go down this journey properly. I think when you're re-architecting, when you can look at managed services, when you can look at the elastic nature of the cloud, we've all been quite happy to not really have to do capacity planning anymore, but it's still trying to get the cloud to work with you for how your system actually runs, how it's actually used, and taking those advantages. It takes me back to a client I had a couple of years ago in Australia that was using machine learning to try and make ships go more smoothly through water with the intention of saving fuel, and there was a commercial opportunity here. I think as you mature and you look at what the cloud enables and you look at what services you can pull together, and as Ollie was saying, with the right framework in place, you can experiment quickly. It's very much an emergent area where giving your engineers freedom to explore this, giving them a mandate to change this, making it part of the culture and action, and not just words, but something that becomes the fabric and kind of the myths that underlie the company, is a real way of actually pushing forward on this. So I think it's giving people the freedom to explore and to make the change happen internally. There are people in every company who want to do this. I think they're just lacking a lot of the time, unfortunately, the mandate right now to be able to go and chase it.
And actually, the key word that you touched about, Josh, there was mandate, right? Because arguably that mandate actually has to trickle down through the entire fabric of the organization, as opposed to just a handful of individuals performing that role, right? Ollie, I'd actually sort of like your guidance, and what perspective would you sort of give to fellow CTOs, CIOs, and C-suite members? Given that EDF has had to consider the impact both as a supplier and as a consumer, how would you suggest leaders build an inclusive sustainability plan? Because safe to say, with employees now wanting to join organizations with a purpose, it actually plays quite a key role in attracting that right talent that helps you then further your sustainability target as well. What would be some advice that you would give to fellow peers?
Yeah, thanks, Deepak, and definitely a key role in terms of attracting and retaining talent, which we can talk about later. I think in terms of a sustainability plan, it's obviously critical in terms of achieving the goals that create financial, societal, and environmental sustainability. You just mentioned you have to have the mandate and get the buy-in from the top. We've got that very clear purpose that's been set out in terms of helping Britain achieve net zero. So I think it's really important to have that sense of purpose. I guess as you lean into that though, and maybe it's not so easy just to jump straight to that. Step one, I guess, is learning about sustainability. We've touched on many aspects of it in this conversation on the panel, but I think it's really important to make sure that actually the different factors and elements of sustainability are well understood, not just at the exec level, but right the way through the organisation. Assessing the areas for improvement. So I guess on this side, there's an element of learning the laws, checking the compliance, assessing what the global issues are, looking at that macro economic view as well as the global view from a sustainability point of view. And clearly that will allow you then to seek out the opportunities in terms of innovation, getting employee input, getting the conversations going to get feedback. At the heart of that is having inclusivity in your core values and obviously thinking about the way that sustainability is being discussed and communicated and modeling that inclusive language, creating that culture of frequent check-ins and safe spaces where people can feedback and making the time for yourself as well to reflect, because you have to reflect. I think that once you've kind of learnt and got awareness for where the improvement are and the opportunities, it is a chance to either create or visit that purpose, and making sure that the purpose is really backing what makes your business tick. Find out where the company's passion is and be very specific about that purpose so that people can really galvanize around that sense of direction in terms of where we're going. And then obviously implementing the changes themselves. So potentially creating a task force, certainly looking at policies and changing policies where they need to be changed, communicating clearly, being clear on how you're going to track performance and reviewing that performance and putting that front and foremost to show the progress. We heard from Andre some of the statistics that help bring this to life. We have very similar things within EDF. And I guess in the softer thing, really creating the events and initiatives that focus in on sustainability across the organisation, that really starts to bring that inclusivity into the mix as well. When we bring that down to a practical level and where some of those actions are, as we said, the moment really is now in terms of making things happen if it's not already happening within the organisation. And there's clearly opportunities that we've spoken about on the panel today, not just across all of the various 10-point plan that I mentioned that covered right from society all the way through, but in terms of your technology and that migration to cloud, or certainly even starting up those new projects within cloud so that you can start to train and learn everything that we've spoken about earlier around innovation, speed to market, and that agility.
And actually, Ollie, on some of the points that you just mentioned there around that innovation and that transition plan, which we all appreciate is not going to happen in one go, I think, Andre, it's safe to say AWS have partnered with organizations for quite some time, helping on the innovation agenda. But safe to say it's not just about the innovation agenda anymore, given the pressing need that we all have to make sure we're playing a part around sustainability. How do you think, or what benefits do you think organizations would have partnering with AWS to leverage the wider innovation engine coming in from AWS and arguably even the wider Amazon organization to achieve their sustainability goals?
Yeah, I think one of the first things I would say is, it's going to sound obvious, right? But first of all, migrate to the cloud, migrate to AWS, because that's, as we've seen, it's more efficient than being on premise. So that's the first obvious thing to say, but it's worth reminding. Even if you're not optimizing, you're already making a step forward. I would also say, let us do the heavy lifting for you. So we have a large scale. We have engineering capability at scale to do this, and we can do things that not all organizations can do. we are investing in building all our servers in our data centers are bespoke built. We've kind of re-optimized everything specifically for what we're trying to do as a business, and that's a lot of innovation that is expensive and that not everyone can do. And it's, frankly, it's no one's, it's not EDF's business to be doing these kind of things, for instance. So, really leverage the heavy lifting we're doing and focus on the bit you can do, which is the innovation and optimizing the workloads. And on the optimizing the workloads, the other thing I would say is try to use services which are where you don't have to manage the utilization yourself. Any managed services, any cloud native services, whatever uses a service where we have to manage the capacity and make sure it's available for you when you want it. When you use these, this gives us much more leverage for us to be able to optimize in the background and actually do something which is much more efficient than if you were trying to do this yourself. So I think there are the key things for me to think about is really use the hard work we're doing to do the kind of things you need to do. That would be the key things that come to mind.
Yeah, and I think that term there, Andre, undifferentiated heavy lifting, I think that pretty much brings it home for everyone, right? I.e., let's stop reinventing the wheel and actually offload some of that to the experts, right? I wouldn't go build a generator myself. That's what EDF would do. I wouldn't go build a data center myself. Actually, Amazon a much better place to do that. But I think throughout that entire journey, oftentimes one of the questions we see being asked time and time again is it's quite hard for individuals to actually understand what the sustainability impact is of their choices, their decisions, both on a technical level and an organizational level. And Josh and Luke, I'd like to pull in both of you here in the first instance. And actually, how do you think teams can sort of get better visibility whilst they're on this innovation journey to look at that sustainability impact on the work that they're doing? And Josh, I'd like to start off with you first, and Luke, we could move on to you then.
I think a lot of it is building the visibility into the process. I mean, I think we've all been the case of we'll build a dashboard and that will fix the world, right? Like if people can see it, then they will, but it's making it so something they actively look at, that it's built into the process. If you're in sprints or however you actually work on your teams, making it so you have those regular check-in points. To Ollie's point earlier, it's a bit of a Druckerism, but what gets measured gets managed. And people have to see the measures in place and really build it into the fabric of how they work. I think that's critical. Over to you, Luke.
Yeah, so I also think I think we as technologists we are in the beneficial position of having like amplification effects in our work. So an architect can, by changes in the architecture and the autonomy that the cloud gives an architect, means that they can reduce run costs by tens, hundreds, thousands of times with simple re-architecting. And similarly for an engineer, they can reuse code tens, hundreds, thousands of times instead of having hundreds of engineers writing closely approximate code repeatedly. All of those things amplify and reduce the ecological footprint of our activities.
No, that's really good insight, Stenson. And I think, Josh, to your point, what doesn't get measured doesn't get managed is actually quite a key one. And I guess on the management side of things, we have had some questions come through, by the way. And for those of you who are currently on the webinar, you can start adding your questions in, and we'll try and make sure we can get those answered over the next 5 minutes. But Ollie, I'd like to come to yourself for a second. And whilst this is not directly related to the energy sector, I do think this is perhaps a trend that we're going to start seeing more and more within the industry. For example, there's a recent release by the Bank of England, sort of, who are going to look to stress test, for example, banks and insurers on actually what the impact of the climate stress is going to have on the resiliency of some of the UK's largest banks and insurers, and looking at what the impact of the shift to net zero from an economy perspective looks like over the coming decades. Do you think over time practices like these are going to start becoming the norm across all industries, or actually regulators are starting to play a much important role to make sure we're all pushing in that common direction of travel?
So we've spoken a lot this morning about the concerns with regards to climate change and the need to act now, and the opportunities we have to help Britain achieve net zero. I think we've also stressed the importance of all sectors of the economy making the sustainability agenda a top priority. I guess climate change and our collective response to it presents both risks and opportunities, and embedding climate change into business financial decisions and the macroeconomic analysis makes sense, and responses to climate change will in part, be motivated by statutory and regulatory objectives. Clearly, we have Ofgem, for example, in the energy, etc., but also motivated by the prospect of enhancing resilience in order to support the transition to the low carbon economy. So I do believe over time practices like these will be more commonplace across all of our sectors of the economy.
And I guess sort of looking over time, Ollie and Andre, I'd like your perspective on this as well. We've had another questions that have come through. If we were to say perhaps fast forward 3 to 5 years from now, what could be the key changes we could expect to see, not just from cloud service providers, but also from energy providers? And I guess furthermore, what change would yourselves perhaps expect to see from us as consumers, right? Andre, I'd like to start off with you first to get your perspective on that.
Yeah, so I think the first point, the last point you made is really important, right? Is consumers are extremely aware of these things and want to have choices, right? So they want to be able to make decisions and have sustainability information on, whether they consume energy, they're buying a t-shirt, they're buying food, they want to be able to understand the impact of their actions. And I think I would say that's one of the key things organizations need to think about, which is how in their business model and the way they engage with their consumers, how do they expose this information to consumers? How do they enable people to make decisions and the right decisions? Some people are prepared to pay more for a product or a service if there is a positive sustainable impact. So give people the opportunity to do that. And that's what could be also a way to start thinking about funding some of this change and some of these new ideas. The other thing I think that's important to think about is all industries and all businesses are extremely connected. Everyone has suppliers who have other suppliers who have other suppliers, and then we all kind of aggregate all these services. And actually, I think that's one of the movement I've seen happen with a lot of my customers, is they're looking for solutions and ways of seeing the end-to-end carbon footprint of what they're doing, and the end-to-end view of their products. And that can be sometimes extremely difficult because it's a very deep and nested supply chain. And I think one of the key things there for me is for companies to start thinking a bit more ecosystem and think about the other companies you're working with and what you have around you and who are your customers. Maybe it's not an end consumer, but maybe you're selling also to other businesses. So to really, we're seeing a few platforms emerge on the market to actually try to make these things a bit more transparent and but easier for companies to share and assemble and understand their end-to-end carbon footprint. So I think these are I would say some of the key things to start thinking about is think about your consumers, think about your ecosystem and how you can leverage all this to think about the problem a bit differently and at a different scale.
And I think to that point, actually, Andre, understanding that end-to-end supply chain is quite critical, right? And actually, I think that's where leveraging some of the data, for example, that AWS themselves gives you on what the impact of your usage is quite key. I guess, Ollie, likewise, from EDF's perspective, given the critical role EDF play in that entire supply chain, what would be some of the key changes you'd expect to see sort of over the next 3 to 5 years?
So we're obviously in the throes of the smart meter rollout. That will continue and conclude. That puts data into the hands of the consumer, to Andre's point, to make decisions and to be able to see the impacts of what's actually going on, coupled with smart home advances where you can actually then start to look at how you're operating your home in terms of energy usage, when you consume energy, how you consume energy, the types of devices that you have within your home and how they take energy on. I've spoken previously about things like the electric vehicles and the choices that we're making around that and the investment. I think all of us have a really strong shared vision of the future, and that comes across in the panel, and that is to build in an affordable, low carbon ecosystem. I guess from our perspective, that's an energy system. One of the things that we've touched on is a little bit around consumer choice and maybe willing to pay more for the impact that it has. I think we're all going to need to make more investment to make this transition, to make the low carbon transition, and therefore from a consumer perspective as well, people are going to be looking to us, as AWS or Contino or EDF to make sure they feel they're getting value for money in what we do. So yes, there's the choice being, but there's also the value for money. And I think from that perspective, it's really on us to protect our customers through this transition and make sure that we hit the net zero as we go through. We've spoken a little bit, so that's the kind of consumer behavior. We've spoken about organizations and what they can do. We've got entities like Imtech. We've spoken about what's happening within AWS and that responsibility for the cloud itself, whilst as consumers we can use the 3 R's of reduce, reuse and recycle to impact how we then use the tools and the platform that's available to us for our applications. I think what's really important from that sector as an entity is we continue to push the boundaries and look for where we can do more and offer that innovation. And that comes through, as we said, the sustainability plan and the key fundamentals that we spoke around innovation, speed to market and agility.
Yeah, and I think to that one point that you made, Ollie, around us all making sure we form that ecosystem that in itself has an end-to-end low carbon footprint starts to become even more critical, right? In order to make sure that awareness and that change is driven at pace, as opposed to just drip fed throughout just part of the actual supply chain. I'm conscious of time. First and foremost, I'd just like to give a massive thank you to all of you for sort of taking the time and joining this panel discussion and debate today. We unfortunately haven't got any more time for questions, but if they do come through, we will get in touch with you and answer those via email if possible. What I would say, based on some of the insights, for example, Luke and Josh have shared today on the call as well, if you would like to know more, there's a brilliant article written by Luke around sort of 8 ways to leverage the cloud to reduce your ecological cost, and actually looking at the 3 R's in more detail. And based on some of the insights that both Ollie and Andre currently shared, you can go and check out more about EDF sustainability agenda, as well as that of AWS, onto the website links that you've got below. If today's webinar has been of interest to you, the entire Contino Live excitement continues on our website. So if you wanted to go and check us out on www.contino.io/events, there'll be more and more of these thought-provoking events and sessions going on across the year. Of course, we're trying to make sure Zoom fatigue and event fatigue isn't a thing. So we will only be focusing on the topics that really matter, because they certainly do to us. And so if you've enjoyed today's sessions and would like to check out other sessions, please do. But if not, thank you all for your time. Again, a massive thank you, Andre, to yourself, Ollie, to yourself, Luke and Josh for joining today's panel discussion, and hope you have a good rest of the day. Thank you.
Thank you.